Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Benjamin Netanyahu finally made it and he passed his judicial reform inside of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu has been looking for several years to have this reform that would allow the Israeli government to have more influence on the appointment of judges in the Israeli Supreme Court. The excuse of Netanyahu and those who pushed for this reform inside of Israel was a process of democratization of the judicial system inside of Israel. But the real intention was Benjamin Netanyahu wanted to protect himself from all of the legal mess and corruption, criminal charges against him inside of Israel. That's the main thing that this is being pushed for primarily. And now he passed it with the majority in the government supporting this, and his plans are going ahead with, of course, big opposition from those who oppose these reforms inside of Israel. People protesting outside of the Israeli KNESSET and in multiple parts of Israel. Tens of thousands of people, police violence against them. Those who were protesting outside of the Israeli KNESSET were calling to burn the KNESSET down. Many of them are opposition members in Israel. And we spoke about just a couple of days ago the alternative parliament that is being made now in Israel with opposition leaders now trying to take away all of the legitimacy from the Israeli KNESSET, because to them that's it. Benjamin Netanyahu turned Israel into a dictatorship. So there were many headlines inside of Israel today with this dramatic move by Benjamin Netanyahu, which is really making him a king in a dictatorship. Benjamin Netanyahu is the biggest dictator in the Middle East. Forget about any Arab dictator, forget about that. Benjamin Netanyahu is now the biggest dictator in the region. This man is challenged by no one. People opposing him left, right, and center, and he's still going against what anyone wants inside of Israel. So many reports, of course, were there inside of Israel, but the most interesting one came with the title of a crushing blow, a knife in the heart of democracy, saying that, well, now in Israel, selecting judges has to go through the Israeli government. It's making it in a way that any judge who wants to advance has to become a lobbyist, and the judges will be afraid to rule against the government. These people are saying that now in Israel, that's it. You're not talking about the separation of powers anymore. No independence for the Supreme Court. No separation between the political side and the judicial side. Everything is going to be imposed by the Israeli government. So Netanyahu is going ahead with it. The government is supporting him, and he is careless about the protests that are happening inside of Israel. But the protests are a very crucial thing, a very crucial element in the progress that Benjamin Netanyahu is having inside of Israel, while simultaneously having these attacks, escalations in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, and in other parts too. To pass this reform and get away with murder, basically, in Israel, dictate whatever needs to happen, sit on the throne of Israel forever as the longest serving dictator of Israel. Maybe he'd want to change the name of Israel tomorrow to Judea or something. He's continuing that, but the opposition inside of Israel, not only that they are increasing the tone against Benjamin Netanyahu, they have been already stripping him of legitimacy, calling him a dictator, a crime minister from a very long time ago. But now it's getting more and more intense. Tens of thousands of people outside of the Israeli Knesset, outside the residence place of Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, in multiple parts of Israel. And it looks like these things will only be escalating further. The important bit in this escalation, in the protests against Benjamin Netanyahu, or the most dangerous thing in the escalation against Benjamin Netanyahu, is the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu will be looking to deviate the attention by doing something even more atrocious. So this is what people need to be expecting now. and plan ahead for. Everyone needs to be very careful, because Benjamin Netanyahu, he's a very dangerous man. And previously, in the past, well, at least if we take the last 1.5 years, whenever there were protests against him, he would carry on to another escalation. So in the beginning of the genocide, he had the temporary ceasefire. The defense minister at the time broke the ceasefire under the excuse that we need to continue with Hamas, we need to crush them, and we cannot end the war with them being there. Then there were protests against him. Protests started to rise. He started to talk about Rafah. He's saying our operations are still in the north, but Hamas are still in the south. We need to chase them. And he dragged this whole Rafah thing for several months, up until he went into Rafah to have an excuse to stay there for several more months, up until he tries to eliminate Hamas or tell people that he wants to eliminate Hamas. Then he had more escalations. All of a sudden, the Hamas weren't dismantled. We dismantled them in other locations. They withdrew from parts of Gaza only for them to go back. Protests started to rise again. He decided to escalate against Lebanon. We moved to an all-out war against Lebanon. Before Benjamin Netanyahu decided to go on all-out war against Lebanon, the protests reached the peak momentum against him. And when he did go to Lebanon, the protests went down. Likewise now, there was, well, support for the ceasefire, people being released, finally having some sort of normality. Then for Benjamin Netanyahu to say, no, Hamas are breaching the ceasefire agreement, creating more problems, having an escalation inside of Gaza. But it's not working as effectively as before. So, from Benjamin Netanyahu's perspective, he needs something very dramatic. He's trying to poke Syria. He's trying to poke Lebanon. He's trying to provoke a very big reaction coming from anyone, really, to have an excuse to engage in something and take people's attention away. But it's not working very effectively. The only hope now that he has to deviate the attention from him is to have an attack against Iran. This is where things are getting dangerous now. Benjamin Netanyahu has been always wanting and dreaming about a war against Iran. He's constantly pushing the United States administration for a war against Iran. We even saw the US President Donald Trump changing his approach with Iran, contrary to how he used to speak before, and threatening that Iran will be punished with every fire shot from Yemen, for example. The United States is already carrying strikes in Yemen. But now Benjamin Netanyahu isn't finding that big of a response that could take away all of the attention. In Gaza, well, the Israeli army isn't having any serious operations apart from killing infants inside of Gaza. The ground terrorists of Israel in Gaza, whether it's in the south or the north, they don't have any specific operations. We spoke about the criticism coming internally from Israel or from Israeli families of those who are being deployed to Gaza, that they don't have any sort of instructions, no time limits, no plans for their operations in Gaza. We gave an example of Tel Sultan in Rafah, where they were asked to besiege the area. They did. After that, they weren't ordered to do anything, as if, they wanted to have a siege for the sake of having a siege. The area is already destroyed anyway. They killed more innocent people too, targeting cars inside of Gaza. Again, no vision, no strategy. But Netanyahu is trying to do that to focus the attention on Gaza rather than on him. It's not working now. The pressure is still rising. He needs a bigger escalation. There were reports that the United States had a breach in the airspace of Iran, despite the fact that there were talks about a potential agreement being reached between Iran and the United States in the past few days, and the fact that they are open for talks. Unlike the, statements that came just days before of Trump, very militant with Iran. But so far, what we do know is that the United States administration, led by Donald Trump, they served Netanyahu with everything he wanted. They served Netanyahu with breaking the ceasefire. They served Netanyahu with committing more genocide in Gaza. They served Netanyahu with exactly everything that he wants. The US administration has been serving Netanyahu and Israel more than what they're serving the United States. And by the way, even Israel is questionable. You know, Benjamin Netanyahu, and it's as if this man has so many things against Trump that he's running him and his administration. So based on all of that, well, maybe Benjamin Netanyahu, if he isn't going to convince Donald Trump to wage an all-out war against Iran, because that's something that the United States was just a step shy away from, really, having a direct attack against Iran, only telling Israel they will support you with defense, but not with attack against Iran. Maybe this time they will be supporting an attack of Israel against Iran, or conduct an attack, a small targeted attack that is bigger than what Israel conducted before, that perhaps the United States can get away with without attracting Iran to an all-out war for the sake of Benjamin Netanyahu. And then if Iran has a bigger response than what the United States expected, that could lead to more tensions, bigger escalations, and more frequent responses and back and forth attacks from Iran and Israel, so that Benjamin Netanyahu can take the people off the streets. Because if Iran starts to land missiles against Benjamin Netanyahu, he could potentially get rid of these protests that are happening against him inside of Israel. Now, so far, it looks like the Israeli population who are opposing Benjamin Netanyahu, they are understanding the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu is having all of these escalations to take away all of the protests against him. But with a bigger attack, they might take a step back, at least with the intensity of the protests. Now, those who are on the streets inside of Israel, the tone that's coming from them is that nothing is going to take them off the streets. Now the talks are, well, even if they have more escalation, they will continue up until they take down Benjamin Netanyahu. So Benjamin Netanyahu, apart from any potential plan or convincing the United States administration to carry out an attack, even if not in a scale of an all-out war, for example, against Iran, he isn't left with too many options inside of Israel to avoid the protests against him. Unless, that is, things will reach to a stage of a full-blown civil war. This is something that more and more Israelis are talking about, and we are seeing an alignment of the Israeli government alongside the Israeli police versus the Israeli Shabak and also the Israeli army. The Israeli army, firstly, because of the level of the people refusing to serve in the army, the criticism within, the recent first outright direct confrontation happening between the IDF chief of staff and the defense minister, who's supposed to make the orders or give the orders to the chief of staff to conduct certain operations in Gaza and in other parts too. So they're already having this confrontation after Benjamin Netanyahu was hoping that this IDF chief of staff will be someone easier to deal with or to control than the previous chief of staff, who was forced to resign, Herzi Halevi. And from the Shin Bet perspective, well, they're outright against the police being completely politicized by Ben Gvir. The Israeli Shin Bet have been conducting a secret investigation into the police under Itamar Ben Gvir. That caused a level of sensitivity not only with the leader of this police force, or the person primarily in charge of the police force, Itamar Ben Gvir, and his office, but the force itself. Now the force itself is feeling like, okay, we have a body here having these investigations against us as a force, when the Israeli police force and the Israeli Shabak were tied. These groups and bodies operate together, usually inside of Israel, passing information, working side by side. Now with Benjamin Netanyahu and such an extreme government that Israel never saw before, you're talking about unprecedented levels of tensions between them that are being translated on the ground. So you have people from the police against the ones from the Shin Bet. The protesters themselves, well, many of them are previous very senior figures inside of the Israeli establishment. Some of them have been previously the IDF chiefs of staff, now being banned from, for example, visiting bases, like Ya'alon, for example, who called what Israel is doing now in Gaza ethnic cleansing, criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu heavily. He was asked to apologize and take back those words. He actually repeated them again. Israel is having an ethnic cleansing in Gaza. And that's the previous IDF chief of staff, who was considered to be on the right wing of Israel, by the way. All of that is leading us to one conclusion. Israel is on its way to something very, very dangerous. Either Benjamin Netanyahu finds a way to deviate from all of this with a very large-scale attack against Iran or against another country that would provoke an immediate or a very strong response, as in they won't leave that other country any option but to respond, and that wouldn't be wrong for that country, by the way, or Israel would potentially go into a civil war. The worst case scenario would be Benjamin Netanyahu doing the first option, having an attack, for example, against Iran, and having a counterattack from Iran against him, and also leading to a civil war, because the Israeli population opposing him already know that he can do such moves only to deviate the attention from the massive growing movement against him inside of Israel.